Okay, snap tabs. They're all the rage at the moment, and there are so many variations and so many uses for these quick little projects to do in the hoop. So I've just opened Pinterest and searched for snap tabs embroidery designs, and there are literally hundreds to look at. And of course, if you Google it, you'll find some as well in the images on Google. So just have a look and get inspired. In today's lesson, I'm going to do a very simple monogram key fob snap tab, but you can use these for so many different things and make some really beautiful designs. There are a few basic considerations when you're digitizing your snap tab, so I'll go through those as I go through the lesson. So let's just close my browser. And here we are in the software. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to do a quick little monogram one, and so we're going to use the monogramming tool, which has been fixed since the latest update. So we can just left click on the monogramming tool and it will open here in your dockers area. It's a fixed docker, you can't undock it. You can't left click and drag it off the docking area, it stays right there. Okay, so as I said, we're going to do a simple one, so I'm just going to choose this first option here because it's a reasonably simple shape. And so I've selected that and it will open with its default settings. Now with key snap tabs, they're embroidered usually on marine vinyl. You can do them on leather, you can do them on felt, but because they are subject to a lot of wear, they don't last very long. They tend to pill and rub. So if you can get your hands on some marine vinyl or some leather, that's a good option for making these with. And because of that, you don't want too many needle penetrations in the actual design. So we're going to eliminate these little satin stitch design ornaments from this design. You can add open running stitch elements. The whole idea is to have your stitches a little bit longer, a little bit further spaced apart, particularly in satin stitch, so that you're not chopping out your letters. You should use probably a jeans 80 needle, so that you're getting a small hole through the leather or vinyl, but the jeans needle has a sharper point than a universal, so it will penetrate through that vinyl or leather more easily. Don't make the mistake of using a leather needle because that will chop little slots and any satin stitch will be chopped out basically, and it will become very unstable. So a jeans needle is probably my best recommendation. Alright, so as I said, I want to remove these ornaments, and that's really easy. In your monogramming, you've got various tabs across the top here. So I'm going to select the ornaments tab, and by default the ornaments in the design are selected, so I can just hit this delete button here and that will remove them. It's zoomed in automatically for me now. Now the borders, I just want a running stitch border. I don't want this satin stitch. I want to see the actual digitizing line. So if I make it a running stitch, it will be a lot easier to work with. So if you click on the borders tab, you can delete the border or you can add more borders. In my online course for the beginners for version 8, I go through the monogramming tool in detail. I must actually update that to show that the monogramming tool is now repaired, but I do go through the basic tools anyway. So the outline type here is satin, and we're going to make it a single. Now the lettering is satin stitch, so I'm going to go to the letters, and of course it says ABC here, and I don't want ABC, I want to put in RUR. Generally speaking, with a monogram, the centre larger letter is the surname, but of course it is optional. I like this layout of the lettering, but again you can choose all sorts of layouts here. So let's just overtype the ABC with RUR. Right, now that is in a font called London, and it has quite a fine narrow part to the U here, so I wanted a little slightly more blocky lettering. Again, this is another issue with stitching on vinyl and leather. You don't want very fine, and I am going to reduce the size of this as well, so that will make this even thinner. At the moment I'm at 167. Let's go to 100%. So it's already quite thin. When I reduce the size, this is going to become quite thin, so I'm going to look for a font that is more blocky, so that I don't have narrow columns of satin that could chop through the vinyl. So I'm going to go to the Fortress. EFGH. They are in alphabetical order. There it is, the Fortress font. Now, for some reason, and it wasn't doing this the other day, but all of a sudden it started just putting this out of alignment. But it might not do it in your software. I don't know what's going on, because the first time I did this it came out really nice. So just bear with me. Just imagine this has come out aligned how it should be, and I'll try and find out what's causing that later. Okay, so I've got my letters correct. Now I want to change the properties of this stitching. You can see here it's because it's such a wide satin here, it's defaulted to the satin special, which adds needle penetrations through the middle here. And as I said, I am going to reduce the size, but before that I want to play around with the settings of the satin stitch. Now I could break this apart and then choose the lettering only, because if you look in your colour film, the monogram is joined together. It's not grouped. These little icons here are indicating that it's all one object. If I try to select any part of it, the whole lot selects. If I right click, I haven't got the option to ungroup. It's not grouped, it's a monogramming object. So in order to get around that, I've lost my monogramming tool. I'll just bring that back. I need to select the whole monogram, and then I have the properties button available down the bottom here. So if I click on that, I can change all sorts of properties. Now I've already got the correct letters in there, and I've got the correct font I want, and I'm not going to play around with the size because it's already scaled very well to this outer border. So, but I do want to go to the fill stitch. So there are two tabs in the lettering object properties. There's the lettering tab and the fill stitch. And here you can see that it's actually automatic satin, but down here it's gone to satin special. So I'm going to click the radio button for satin and apply that. So now I've got my satin stitches going all the way across, albeit very wide ones, but we won't worry about that just now because I'm going to scale it. But I also want to change the satin spacing, because the default spacing is fairly dense, and that means that there's a lot of needle penetrations right next to each other around the letter, which could chop through the vinyl or the leather. So I'm going to go to manual spacing, and I'm going to put 0.5 in there and apply that. So that's opened it up slightly, and I'm sure that it will still look fine when it's stitched. If you find when you do your test sew that is too sparse for you, you could try going back to 0.4. Do a test sew on some felt, and that's a good indication of how it's going to look. Then you could try going back to 0.4 and then try it on the leather. But as I said, the thing you need to be mindful of is how close these needle penetrations are. So you can also have a look at that by going up here to, I can't while I'm in the object properties, I'll show you shortly. So The other thing I want to do is remove the underlay, because vinyl and leather are quite stable. They don't need an underlay, and that's just more needle penetrations and more stitches you don't need. So I'm going to go to the effects, and I'm going to remove, it has an edge walk underlay which would also assist in chopping, and it has a zigzag underlay as well. So I'm going to remove both of those just by deselecting the checkbox in underlay 1, and it will actually remove both, and go OK. So now I haven't got any underlay. So while I'm now here, I shall go into out of true view, and that will show me the stitches. And if I've got needle points showing, so I'll zoom in there for you, and you can see these are quite close together. Now you want to be looking at them at 100% to see how close they're actually going to be, and you can't see them because of the background. So if I click off, even then you can't see them. So the only other way is to go to design, background, and put yourself a darker background in. Now if you've got your hoop showing, you'll need to change the hoop background as well, because they do work independently. So I'll go OK. So now you can actually see those needle penetrations, and they are fairly close together. So they're a bit better around the curves here. So as I said, you'll need to test so, but I'm pretty sure that will work OK at 0.5. Alright, so we'll go back to true view, and I'll continue on. Even with this colour background, it doesn't matter. Alright, now I need to have the tab part where the snaps are going to go, and the easiest way to do that is we're finished with the monogramming section now, so we can close that. It gives us a bigger workspace, and we can digitize ourselves a rectangle. So I'm going to click on rectangle, left click and drag, and left click when I'm finished. And of course I should have selected outline. I always forget to do that, so I'll select it and choose outline. Right, so I've got a rectangle outline, and I want a curved top on it. So I'm going to go to the before I do that, I'm going to size it. So the size of the tab, the width will be dependent upon the size of your snaps. So if you've got 12mm snaps, you'll need it a bit wider, so say 15mm wide. If you've got 10mm snaps, then you'll need it probably 12 or 13mm wide. So just allow a little bit extra for the width over and above the width of your snap tab. Your snaps, sorry. So I'm going to set the size, and for that I don't want to proportionally scale it, because I want to set the width and the height separately. So I'm going to unlock the lock, and then I'm going to set my width at 15mm, and I'm going to tab forward and set my length to 50mm. Now 50mm should be fine for most or at least 10 and 12mm snaps, but it's up to you how long you make it. But just to allow for some space between the tabs, so that when you fold it over, you've got a little bit of space to work with. So I shall enter that. Okay, so there's my tab. Now my design is still too big. I can Control A to select everything, but that will select this as well. So I'm just going to draw a bounding box in. I did size this the first time I did it, and so I just used Control A. So we want a width of 50mm for this part, and I want it to scale proportionally. So I'm going to lock the lock again, and I'm going to enter the width of 50mm and enter, and that will scale the height to correspond. Okay, now we can go back to our tab, and as I said, I want to create a curve on the top of that. So I'm going to select it, and I'm going to go to the reshape tool, and if I right click in the middle of this top line, I will get a round node which is a curved node. So then I can just lift that up to create a curved top. Now you can eyeball this, or you can set yourself up guidelines, or you can use the grid, but it's so tiny, so long as you're pretty much lined up. Whoops, I seem to be going a little bit too far each way. That's close enough. So long as you've got a reasonable curve there, it's not really going to make a huge difference if it's ever so slightly off center. The main thing is you haven't got any sharp corners here that are going to catch on things. You'll have a nice curved round tab, and your first snap can go in that curved area. Alright, so we'll go out of reshape and into ordinary select, and then we can move this over to the top of our tab, and I'm just going to overlap it ever so slightly. Now the one thing you want to watch here is how the lines are going to go when we convert it. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. We want this to be just one outline, and we don't want these lines here. Now I could cut them out with the knife, and then I could I don't know, make sure I had start and ends in the right place, so it's continued sewing around as one, but that is a bit messy. So what I'm going to do is go to the digitize, edit toolbox, and I'm going to select the whole design. So I could go Control A again, or draw a bounding box. The whole design is selected. And I'm going to go to the Outlines and Offsets tool. And in here I am going to choose Object Outline, so a checkbox there, a single outline. I'm going to choose red. You can use any colour you like. And I'm going to choose this centre option where it goes right round the outside. It doesn't go through any centre parts of the design. There should be no check in the offset outlines, and your corners, the sharp corners, are best for this particular design, but you can, depending on your design, you could choose these other options as well. No check in the holes, include holes box, because we don't want to include any holes. We're just going around the outside, and click OK. And now if you look in your colour film, you've got this lovely outline going right round. So now we don't need the original tab or the original border from the design. We can get rid of those. Now, as I said before, the monogram is one object, and so the letters and the border are linked. So we need to break that apart. So select either the border, or if I go to individual, there we are. So if I go to individual objects, you can see when I selected the border, it also selected the lettering, and then we can go in the same edit toolbox and we can come down and break that apart. Now we can select the border on its own, and if we hold our control key down, we can select the tab and we can delete those. Alright, now when you stitch out a snap tab, you need a placement line so that you know where to put your piece of leather or vinyl, and then you will stitch whatever your design is for the front of the snap tab. And then last of all, you will stitch the outline, but before you do that, you will put another piece of vinyl or leather on the back of the hoop, and you will stitch all three together, both layers of leather together with your final outline, and then you'll remove it from the hoop, remove your stabilizer, and cut around the edge. I will put a link to somebody else's video in the description so that you can go and look at a snap tab being stitched out, so you know what the process is. Okay, so I need a placement line, and this outline will be perfect, so I'm going to select it and move it to the top to make it the placement line. And now I'm going to, and I've got my lettering stitching next, so now I want the final outline to stitch. So I'm going to duplicate the outline by right clicking and duplicating, and it will come at the end where I want it. And I'm just going to go to the object properties for that, And I'm going to change it to triple so it looks nice and bold, but I'm going to change the stitch length to 3.5 so that we've got, so the needle penetrations aren't too close together. And I'm also going to remove the variable run length. I'll show you what I mean. If I zoom in here, you can see here, first I'll apply that. So I've changed it to single, whoops, and I need to change that to 3.5. Just jumped back and apply that. Alright, so you might be able to see here that the stitch, if I go out of true view, you can see your needle penetrations. Hang on, we've got a bit of tying in, and oh, it seems to have run round because it's actually more visible in the true view. Because it's a triple stitch, there were a lot more needle penetrations, but you can see, if I zoom in, you can see these stitches are quite long, but as we go around the curve, they get quite short, and that's because variable run length is checked. So what the software does is when it's going around a curve, it shortens the stitch length to a minimum length of 1 millimeter to make a nice smooth curve. But in actual fact, I'm going to turn that off so that we don't have short stitches, and apply that. And now you can see the stitches are a bit longer, but it does get around the curve reasonably well. So I'm happy with that. Okay, zoom to fit. Alright, so that's basically all you need to do to make yourself a snap tab design. So you can make any design here, and you can use all sorts of options for making outlines around it. But this is just a basic little tutorial to get you started. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have fun creating your own special designs.